for a guy who only weighed 138 pounds, and he weighed less than that when he passed away. He hit extremely hard. He could hit as hard as a heavyweight.
Bruce Lee and Joe Louis, stepping into the ring. One, a revolutionary philosopher who redefined combat with blinding speed and precision. The other, a heavyweight karate champion who dominated with raw power and unshakable discipline. What happened when these two legends faced off? Spoiler alert, it wasn't just a sparring session. It was a moment that changed martial arts forever. Joe Louis himself spilled the tea, revealing jaw-dropping details about his encounter with Bruce Lee. And trust me, you're not ready for what he had to say. So, grab a seat, hit that like button, and let's unpack this epic showdown. We're breaking it down step by step, from their backgrounds to the fight that left Louis questioning everything he knew about combat. Stick around, because this is going to be a wild ride. The legends. Who were Bruce Lee and Joe Louis? Let's set the stage by diving into who these two warriors were. Bruce Lee. His name alone sparks awe. A man who weighed just 138 pounds at his peak, and even less when he tragically passed. Bruce was no ordinary fighter. He wasn't just throwing punches. He was rewriting the rule book of martial arts. Born in San Francisco and raised in Hong Kong, Lee grew up immersed in a world of combat, training in Wing Chun under the legendary Yip Man. But Bruce wasn't one to stay boxed in. He saw martial arts as a living, breathing art form, not a rigid set of rules. His creation, Jeet Kune Do, wasn't just a style, it was a philosophy. Bruce believed in stripping away the fluff, focusing on efficiency, adaptability, and raw power. His famous one-inch punch? It wasn't just a party trick. It was a testament to his ability to generate explosive force from minimal movement. His speed was unreal, his precision surgical, and his mind? A weapon sharper than any fist. Bruce didn't just fight. He thought through every move, dissecting human mechanics like a scientist. His philosophy of being like water, formless, adaptable, unstoppable, made him a pioneer who inspired generations. Now, let's talk about Joe Louis. If Bruce was a philosopher, Joe was a juggernaut. A towering figure in American karate, Joe was a force of nature in the ring. Born in 1944, he served as a Marine before diving headfirst into martial arts. Trained under Okinawan master C. Oyeda, Louis became a multi-time heavyweight karate champion, dominating full-contact tournaments with a blend of brute strength and calculated aggression. At over 200 pounds, Joe was a powerhouse, known for crushing opponents with precise, bone-shattering strikes. His roundhouse kicks could end fights in seconds, and his reputation was ironclad. Nobody messed with Joe Louis. But what set him apart wasn't just his power. It was his intelligence. Joe studied his opponents, exploited their weaknesses, and adapted on the fly. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a strategist who thrived under pressure. By the mid-1960s, Joe was a legend in his own right, a champion who seemed untouchable. So, how did these two icons cross paths? The martial arts world in the 1960s was a melting pot of styles: karate, kung fu, taekwondo, you name it. Tournaments like the Long Beach International Karate Championships were where legends were made. Bruce and Joe met in this vibrant scene, drawn together by their shared passion for pushing the boundaries of combat. They weren't just colleagues. They trained together, sparred, and exchanged ideas. But whispers of a legendary showdown between them started to spread. Was it a friendly spar, a test of skill, or an all-out battle to prove who was the best? For years, fans speculated, but the truth remained locked away until Joe Louis finally spoke up. His confession about what went down is nothing short of mind-blowing, and it's time we dig into the details. But before we get to the fight, let's understand why this clash was destined to happen. Bruce and Joe weren't just fighters. They were trailblazers, each in their own way, and their meeting was a collision of two unstoppable forces. The stage is set, the Long Beach tournament and beyond. Fast forward to 1967, the Long Beach International Karate Championships. This wasn't just another tournament. It was the epicenter of martial arts evolution. Picture a buzzing arena packed with fighters, instructors, and fans, all eager to see the best of the best. Joe Louis was already a star, a heavyweight champ who walked into every room like he owned it. His presence was commanding, his record unmatched. He'd faced the toughest fighters of his era and walked away victorious, his fists and feet leaving a trail of defeated opponents. But at Long Beach, someone caught his eye. Bruce Lee, not yet the global icon he'd become, was making waves. His reputation as a martial arts prodigy was growing, and his demonstrations were the talk of the town. Joe, ever the curious competitor, watched closely. What he saw would change his perspective forever. Bruce took the stage for a demonstration, and it was like nothing anyone had seen before. At just 138 pounds, he didn't look like a typical fighter, but when he moved, it was pure magic. His strikes were a blur, his footwork like a dancer's, and his 1-inch punch sent grown men stumbling backward. Joe, a man who'd seen it all, was stunned. "I thought I knew power," he'd later say. But this was different. Bruce's movements weren't just fast. They were deliberate, calculated, and devastatingly effective. The crowd was in awe, and Joe, standing among them, felt a mix of admiration and curiosity. He had to know more. This wasn't just a performance. It was a challenge to everything traditional martial arts stood for. What happened next wasn't a public spectacle, but a private encounter that would become the stuff of legend. Joe and Bruce, both at the peak of their abilities, agreed to spar. This wasn't a tournament match with judges and points. It was a raw, unfiltered test of skill. Joe walked in confident, his years of full contact fighting giving him an edge, or so he thought. He'd faced giants, knocked out champions, and mastered the art of traditional karate. But Bruce wasn't traditional. He didn't follow rules or stick to forms. His Jeet Kune Do was about breaking free, adapting and striking with maximum efficiency. As they squared off, the air crackled with anticipation. Two warriors, two philosophies, two worlds about to collide. Joe started strong, relying on his signature power moves. His roundhouse kick, a weapon that floored countless opponents, was his go-to. He kept his stance solid, his guard up, ready to dominate. But Bruce was a different beast. He didn't stand still. He flowed, weaving in and out of range, his eyes locked on Joe like a predator sizing up prey. Before Joe could fully process it, Bruce struck, a jab so fast it was like a gunshot. It landed clean, right on Joe's chest, and the force was shocking. "I didn't even see it coming," Joe would later admit. Another strike followed, then another, each one precise, each one a wake-up call. Joe tried to counter, throwing a flurry of punches, but Bruce was already gone, sidestepping with ease. It was like fighting a ghost. This wasn't just a spar, it was a revelation. Joe, a man who'd built his career on power and precision, was being outclassed. Bruce's speed wasn't just physical, it was mental. He seemed to know Joe's moves before they happened, countering with a fluidity that defied logic. For the first time, Joe felt slow, predictable, and vulnerable. The Long Beach encounter wasn't just a fight. It was a turning point, a moment that forced Joe to rethink everything he knew about martial arts. And for fans, it's a story that proves just how far ahead of his time Bruce Lee really was. The Clash, a battle of speed and power. Now, let's get to the heart of it, the actual clash between Bruce Lee and Joe Louis. This wasn't a choreographed movie scene or a friendly pat-on-the-back spar. This was two of the greatest martial artists in history, going head-to-head, no holds barred, in a private training session that would become legendary. Joe Louis, the heavyweight karate champ, walked in with confidence. He'd faced the best, beaten the best, and his track record spoke for itself. At over 200 pounds, he was a mountain of muscle, his strikes powerful enough to end fights in seconds. But Bruce Lee? He was 138 pounds of pure dynamite, a man who could hit like a heavyweight despite his size. And when they faced off, the difference in their approaches was stark. Joe relied on his traditional karate training, structured, disciplined, and devastatingly powerful. His strategy was simple. Control the distance, wait for an opening, and unleash hell. He'd done it countless times, and it always worked. But Bruce didn't play by those rules. His Jeet Kune Do was about freedom, about moving like water, adapting to every situation. As they began, Joe threw a powerful jab, expecting to set the pace. But before it even landed, Bruce was already in motion. A lightning-fast counterstrike hit Joe's midsection, so quick it felt like a phantom. I didn't see it, Joe later said, his voice tinged with disbelief. It was like he was already there before I moved. Bruce's speed was otherworldly. His famous one-inch punch, which he demonstrated at Long Beach, was no gimmick. It was biomechanics perfected, a transfer of energy so efficient it could knock a man off his feet. Joe felt it firsthand, a jab that landed with the force of a sledgehammer. Despite Bruce's small frame, Joe tried to retaliate, launching a roundhouse kick that had crushed opponents before. But Bruce wasn't there. He sidestepped, his footwork so fluid it was like he was dancing. In a flash, he countered with a combination, jab, cross, hook, each strike landing with pinpoint accuracy. Joe was a champion, but he was being outmaneuvered at every turn. What made this fight so humbling for Joe wasn't just Bruce's speed. It was his precision. Every move had a purpose. There was no wasted energy, no hesitation. Bruce wasn't just reacting. He was anticipating, reading Joe's intentions like an open book. When Joe tried to overwhelm him with a barrage of strikes, Bruce slipped through the gaps, countering with a spinning back kick that hit Joe like a freight train. The impact stole his breath, forcing him to stumble back. "I thought I was tough," Joe later admitted, "but that kick made me feel like a beginner." For the first time, Joe realized that power alone wasn't enough. Bruce's philosophy, adaptability, efficiency, flow, wasn't just talk. It was a reality, and Joe was living it. The sparring session wasn't about who won or lost. It was about a clash of ideals. Joe's traditional karate was rooted in structure, in mastering forms and techniques. Bruce's Jeet Kune Do was about breaking those forms, about being free to adapt and strike where the opponent was weakest. For Joe, it was like fighting a shadow. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, leaving only the sting of a perfectly placed strike. Fans who hear this story are left in awe, not just of Bruce's skill, but his ability to redefine what it meant to be a martial artist. This wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson, one that Joe would carry with him for the rest of his life. The revelation, Joe Louis's confession. After the dust settled, Joe Louis walked away from that sparring session a changed man. He wasn't just bruised physically. He was shaken to his core. For years, he'd been the king of the ring, a heavyweight champion who dominated with power and precision. But facing Bruce Lee was like stepping into a different dimension. In a rare interview that resurfaced decades later, Joe finally opened up about what happened, and his words sent shockwaves through the martial arts world. "Bruce was the fastest guy I ever faced," he said. "I thought I knew speed, but he was on another level. He hit me, and I didn't even see it coming." That confession alone is enough to give you chills. But it's what Joe learned from the experience that makes this story so profound. Joe described the moment he realized he was outclassed. It wasn't just about Bruce's physical abilities, though those were mind-boggling. It was his mind, his ability to read Joe's every move before it happened. He was always one step ahead. Joe said, "It was like he knew what I was going to do before I did." Bruce's Jeet Kune Do wasn't just about throwing punches. It was about understanding combat on a deeper level. He studied human movement, analyzed reaction times, and optimized every strike for maximum impact. His one-inch punch, for example, wasn't just about power. It was about transferring energy through perfect biomechanics. Joe tried to replicate it later, but admitted, "I could never match his velocity. It was like trying to catch lightning." What struck Joe most was Bruce's restraint. He was holding back. Joe revealed, "If he'd gone full force, I might not have walked away." That's a staggering admission from a man who'd faced the toughest fighters of his era. Bruce wasn't just fighting to win. He was teaching, showing Joe the limits of traditional martial arts. One key lesson was about blocking. Joe had relied on classic karate blocks, rigid, structured movements designed to stop an attack. But Bruce showed him a better way. "Just move your forearm." Joe recalled Bruce saying, "Don't waste energy with big motions." It was a small adjustment, but it revolutionized Joe's approach. By minimizing movement, he could stay defensive while setting up a counterattack. It was a glimpse into Bruce's genius. Every technique was streamlined for efficiency. For fans, Joe's confession is more than just a story. It's a window into Bruce Lee's brilliance. The martial arts community exploded when this interview resurfaced. Forums lit up, Social media buzzed, and fans dissected every word. "This is proof Bruce was untouchable," one commenter wrote. Others debated whether any modern fighter could match his speed. Joe's humility added weight to the story. He didn't try to downplay his defeat or make excuses. Instead, he paid tribute to Bruce, calling him a phenomenon. That kind of respect from a champion like Joe Louis speaks volumes. It wasn't just about who was stronger or faster. It was about who saw combat differently. Bruce's philosophy of adaptability, of being like water, wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a way of life, and Joe experienced it firsthand. This revelation also sparked a broader conversation about Bruce's legacy. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a teacher who pushed everyone around him to be better. Joe took those lessons and applied them, refining his own style to incorporate more fluidity and adaptability. The fact that a man of Joe's caliber was humbled by Bruce only adds to the mystique. It's a story that reminds us why Bruce Lee remains an icon, not just for his skills, but for his ability to change how we think about martial arts. The philosophy behind the fight. Bruce Lee wasn't just a fighter. He was a philosopher, a visionary who saw martial arts as more than just punches and kicks. His encounter with Joe Louis wasn't just a test of skill. It was a clash of ideologies. To understand why this fight was so transformative, we need to dive into Bruce's philosophy and how it shaped his approach to combat. At the core of Jeet Kune Do was a simple but radical idea: reject tradition, embrace freedom. Bruce believed that rigid styles, karate, kung fu, taekwondo, box fighters in limiting their potential. "Don't get set into one form," he famously said. "Be like water, flowing and adapting to any situation." This wasn't just poetry. It was a blueprint for combat, and Joe Louis felt its full force. Bruce's philosophy was rooted in efficiency. Every movement had to serve a purpose. Wasted energy was a weakness, and hesitation was a death sentence. His one-inch punch, for example, wasn't just a display of power. It was a masterclass in biomechanics. By aligning his body, focusing his energy, and striking at the perfect moment, Bruce could generate force that defied his size. Joe, a man who relied on power, was stunned by how much damage Bruce could inflict with minimal effort. It wasn't just strength, Joe said. It was precision, timing, everything. Bruce's strikes weren't wild swings. They were calculated, each one designed to exploit a specific weakness. Another key aspect of Bruce's philosophy was mental discipline. He didn't just train his body. He trained his mind to anticipate, adapt, and dominate. During their spar, Joe noticed that Bruce seemed to enter a Zen alpha state, as he called it. It was like Bruce was operating on a different plane, his focus so intense that Joe's attacks seemed to bounce off him. This mental edge gave Bruce an almost supernatural ability to predict Joe's moves. When Joe threw a kick, Bruce was already moving, countering before the attack could land. It was like he was reading Joe's mind, turning the fight into a chess match where Bruce was always 3 moves ahead. For Joe, this was a wake-up call. His traditional karate training emphasized structure, specific stances, predetermined blocks, and powerful strikes. But Bruce showed him that structure could be a trap. By staying fluid, Bruce could slip through Joe's defenses, striking from angles Joe didn't expect. One moment that stood out was when Joe tried to overpower Bruce with a flurry of punches. In traditional karate, this might have worked, forcing the opponent to retreat. But Bruce didn't retreat. He flowed around Joe's attacks, redirecting the energy and landing counters that left Joe gasping. It was like fighting water. Joe later said, "You can't grab it, can't stop it." This philosophy didn't just change Joe, it changed martial arts. Bruce's ideas laid the groundwork for modern mixed martial arts MMA, where fighters blend styles to create their own. Joe took these lessons to heart, incorporating more fluidity into his fighting style. He began to question the rigid forms he relied on, experimenting with new techniques and strategies. Fans who hear this story are blown away, not just by Bruce's skill, but by his ability to teach through combat. The fight wasn't about proving who was better. It was about showing Joe a new way to see martial arts. And that's what makes Bruce Lee a legend. He didn't just win fights. He changed minds. The legacy, how Bruce Lee and Joe Louis shaped martial arts. The clash between Bruce Lee and Joe Louis wasn't just a moment in time. It was a turning point for martial arts. Joe walked away from that sparring session with more than just a bruised ego. He carried lessons that would shape his career and influence the martial arts world for decades. Bruce, meanwhile, solidified his status as a revolutionary, a man whose ideas transcended the ring. Let's explore how this encounter rippled through history, cementing both men as legends and paving the way for the martial arts we know today. For Joe Louis, the fight was a humbling experience, but it was also a gift. He'd built his career on power and discipline, dominating full-contact karate with an iron fist. But Bruce showed him a different path. By embracing adaptability, Joe began to refine his style, incorporating elements of Bruce's fluidity and efficiency. He started experimenting with new blocks, focusing on minimal movement to conserve energy. He also adopted a more open mindset, questioning the rigid traditions of karate. Bruce taught me that heart matters as much as technique. Joe said in his resurfaced interview, "You need guts to start a fight, but heart to finish it." That lesson became a cornerstone of Joe's approach, making him an even more formidable fighter. Bruce's impact, of course, went far beyond Joe. His philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, being formless, adaptable, and efficient, challenged the martial arts establishment. Wow, what a journey! The clash between Bruce Lee and Joe Louis isn't just a fight. It's a legend that continues to inspire martial artists and fans alike. Bruce, with his blinding speed and revolutionary philosophy, showed the world that martial arts could be more than tradition. It could be a path to self-expression and limitless potential. Joe Louis, a champion in his own right, walked away from that encounter forever changed, carrying lessons that shaped his career and the martial arts world. Their story reminds us that greatness isn't about who wins or loses. It's about pushing boundaries, challenging limits, and inspiring others to do the same. So, what do you think? Could you have stood a chance against Bruce Lee in the ring? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your take. If you love diving into this epic showdown, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your fellow martial arts fans, and hit that subscribe button for more stories from the world of combat. We've got plenty more coming your way, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and as Bruce would say, be like water, my friends.